The C3 T500 from PcCooler / CPS looks really nice for its 100 USD MSRP. But is it just another O11 copy? Let's find out. What's up everyone, Eric here and welcome to Hardware for Gamers. For those of you who are new to the channel, I test and review PC cases, CPU coolers, PC case fans, and graphics cards. Before I get to the overview, just to have full disclosure, PcCooler / CPS did send me this case to test and review, but all opinions expressed in this video are mine and mine alone. So if you do end up liking this video, please hit that like button and maybe subscribe to the channel, because apparently it helps with the algorithms, the stuff, the AI, YouTube stuff. Like all my case reviews, I will have timestamps or chapters down in the description, so you can jump to whatever interests you. But as always, I do recommend you watch the whole review. Okay, with that out of the way, on to the overview. PcCooler has pretty much just released the C3 T500 in North America on November 20th. The T500 has two color options, white and black. Now, as far as I can tell, as of time of recording this video, prices are not at the MSRP prices. Hopefully they do end up dropping, because I guess third-party sellers are trying to make a little bit of extra money on this. But hopefully as stock fills out, the price does come down to the MSRP or maybe even lower. PcCooler provides a small bag that has all these screws and fittings in it. There are also some zip ties and the user manual. The T500 also comes with an aRGB fan hub that is pre-installed. Now, taking a look at the case, as you can see, the T500 isn't a standard mid-tower case. It has a tempered glass front, while the intake fans are along the bottom of the case, with the exhaust fans at the rear and side of the case. The T500's dimensions with the feet are 39.2 centimeters high by 29.5 centimeters wide by 51.5 centimeters deep. So this does take up a good bit of desk. The front I/O is located on the top of the case. There is a combo port for the front audio out and microphone. There are two USB 3.0 Type A ports, one USB 3.1 Type C port, as well as an LED and power button. There is also a large magnetic dust filter along the top of the case. Under this dust filter is tooling for 3 120 or 2 140mm fans. At the rear of the case, we see the rear I/O location, one pre-installed 120mm aRGB fan, the power supply location, which has been turned onto its side, and there are 6 horizontal expansion slots, which all have reusable covers. Taking a look at the bottom of the case, there are 2 feet. These feet give 23mm of ventilation for those bottom intake fans. The feet are made of steel, but do have foam pads along the bottom of each foot, so the case won't just simply slide around or scratch your desk. There is also a magnetic dust filter along the bottom of the case, but because of the shape of the feet, this filter is a bit difficult to access. Moving on to the right side of the case, the right side panel is steel. There are 2 sets of honeycomb ventilation holes on this panel. To remove the right side panel, you need to undo the thumb screw and clamp at the rear of the case, then pull back on the metal tab until the panel unclips. Then lean the panel back and lift it away. The side panel is made up of a single sheet of bent steel with some okay sized grooves in it, so it does feel pretty rigid. On the inside of the panel, there are 2 magnetic dust filters that cover the 2 sets of ventilation holes. Moving to the left side of the case, the left side panel is tempered glass. To remove this glass panel is very similar to removing the right side panel. Undo the thumb screw and clamp at the rear of the case, then pull back on the metal tab until the panel unclips. Then lean the panel back and lift it away. This glass panel is 3mm tempered glass and is very clear. And that's the exterior of the case. But before I move on to the interior of the case, if you like what I'm doing here, could you please support the channel by using my Amazon Associates links that are in the description? All you need to do is click on the link that suits your location, and when you add an item or items to your cart and order them, the channel will get a small kickback at no added cost to you. It is a great way to support the channel without actually shelling out any additional money. Now for the inside of the case. There is no basement. Rather, the intake fans are directly under the GPU, so the GPU should only be getting fresh air, which should be good for GPU temperatures. Now looking at the motherboard tray, there are 11 cutouts on the motherboard tray. Not all these cutouts are for running cables through. This case does support rear mounting motherboards. So those new fancy ASUS motherboards that have the connectors on the back side of the motherboard so that you don't actually see any of your cables, this case supports that. You also won't be able to use the bottom two cutouts if you go with an ATX motherboard, which really only leaves the two along the top for running cables. Thankfully, there is the build-out that has two more large cutouts, and this is where most of your cables will be running through anyways. Finally, there are the two exhaust fans located just after the build-out along the front of the case. The T500 supports mini ITX, micro ATX, and ATX motherboards. The maximum GPU length is 400 millimeters, and the maximum CPU cooler height is 175 millimeters. Now turning the case around to look at the back side of the case, there is 90 millimeters given behind the motherboard tray, which gives enough room for a 3-bay drive cage. This drive cage can hold two 3.5-inch hard drives and one 2.5-inch SSD. This drive cage can be removed by unscrewing 4 screws at the rear of the case. That 90 millimeter depth also means that there's enough room for up to a 200 millimeter ATX power supply, which is pretty nice. And finally, there are a good number of cable tie-offs on the backside of the motherboard tray. So managing your cables should be fairly simple. And I guess that brings us to the cooling options for the T500. The T500 has 6 pre-installed aRGB PWM fans. That's 3 120mm fans along the bottom, 2 120mm fans on the side, and 1 120mm fan at the rear. These fans have a 4-pin PWM fan connector with a daisy chain, and the 5-volt aRGB LEDs use the 50/50 connector, which also have a daisy chain. Now this case can support up to 9 120mm fans. That's 3 fans along the bottom, 2 fans on the side, 3 fans along the top, and 1 at the rear. Now if you do prefer having 140mm fans, you can have up to 5. So that's 2 fans along the bottom, 2 fans along the top, and 1 fan at the rear. For radiator support, you can have up to a 360mm along the bottom, up to a 240 on the side, up to a 360 along the top, and up to a 140 at the rear. Okay, that's it for the overview. Now on to my build notes. Starting with cable management, I was able to fit my non-modular power supply as well as all the cable extensions, and was able to make everything fairly clean looking. I was able to get the right side panel on without any issue, which is very nice. Now with that being said, I would highly recommend using a modular power supply, as I do with all cases. Doing so will make dealing with aRGB cables and all that type of stuff a whole lot easier. Which I guess brings us to our next talking point, the aRGB fans and hub. There are 12 fan cables, each with a daisy chain. That's a whole lot of cables to have to deal with. Now yes, there is the hub, which then you can kind of daisy chain them together and plug them in, so you don't necessarily need that many headers or whatever, but just that's a lot of cables to have to deal with. And that's just, if you want to deal with aRGB at this point in time, or want to have aRGB at this point in time, it's something you have to deal with. For most every fan. There are starting to get, the more expensive fans do have the nice like clip stuff going on, but that stuff's still very expensive, and if that was in this case would be like $600. So there are 2 sets or 2 styles of fans here. One set is with a standard airflow direction, and one set is in a reverse airflow direction. The fans don't have any model name or number on them, but they are 4-pin PWM fans. They have 9 blades. They have a max rated RPM of only 1100, which mine weren't even getting up to that. Mine were more at like 1020-ish. And they use the aRGB 3-pin 5-volt 50/50 connector, which is also what the hub uses, meaning adding 5-volt aRGB fans to the system should be pretty simple, but is something to keep in mind when you are looking at adding extra LEDs, is that you do need to either have an adapter to the 50/50 or have it be the 50/50 connector, and then you can add a whole bunch of RGB to this case with no issue. The hub can be used to control the 5-volt aRGB LEDs. There are a number of presets built into the hub, so you can have different colors, different strobings, and or whatever. All you need to do is press the LED button and you can cycle through whatever you want and find something you like. Or it is also possible to plug in the 3-pin lead from the hub to your motherboard and have the motherboard use its software to control the LEDs. To do this, all you need to do is plug in that lead into your motherboard and then hold down the LED button for 2 seconds. The LEDs should flicker and then switch over to the motherboard. To switch back to the hub, all you need to do is press the LED button and it switches back. Now, I didn't do this myself, but it is possible to remove the front tempered glass panel. All you need to do is unscrew 4 screws holding the panel in that are located in the front of the case, and then it should pull away. Now, the only reason I would ever remove this front glass panel is if I was doing a hardline custom loop. Outside of that, I really don't see any purpose on wanting to remove that front glass panel. If you're just doing an AIO or whatever, you really don't need to remove it. Now, for issues building in this case, I guess I have 2. First is where the hub is located. Now, based on how the chassis is or was designed, there really isn't a great place for it, but having it on the motherboard tray makes more sense to me anyways. And you can kind of fit it in there and it doesn't interfere with anything. Now, for my testing, I did have it located where it is stock, just so that everything is stock for my temperature testing. My second issue is with the bottom cutouts on the motherboard tray. And this is if you're using an ATX motherboard, they're not usable, which is kind of silly, odd, and weird. I understand these aren't breaking issues, but they are odd oversights or weird cost savings that I don't fully understand. So as always, just something to keep in mind if you are looking at this case. Well, that's it for my build notes, so on to the temperature testing. If you have any questions on how I test the cases, please watch my case testing methodology video. I'll have a card above. I will also have it linked down in the description. Just to let you all know, I didn't do my fan normalized testing on this case because it's not a normal mid-tower case, and I didn't really see there being a point in doing the extra testing. It was just really a waste of time. And if you have an issue with that, sorry. Starting with the CPU workload test, so having the stock fans in their stock orientation running at full speed had the CPU's average steady state temperature at 76.8 C. With the stock fans in their stock orientation with no filters, had the CPU's average steady state temperature drop by 3.5 C to 73.1 C. So the filters are affecting the CPU temperature here by quite a bit. Then when I moved all 3 exhaust fans to the top of the case, meaning that the intake fans are still located along the bottom, the CPU's average steady state temperature was 76 Celsius. So only a very, very minor improvement over the stock orientation. Now for the game testing, the stock fans at full speed in their stock orientation had the GPU's average steady state temperature at 71.1 C and had the CPU's average temperature at 49.7 C. The stock fans running at full speed in their stock orientation but with no filters had the GPU's average steady state temperature go down to 66.7 C and the CPU's average temperature go down to 46.4 C. So the filters are affecting the GPU temperatures as well. When I moved all 3 exhaust fans to the top of the case, the GPU's average steady state temperature was 71.4 C and the CPU's average temperature was 49.4 C. So moving the exhaust fans to the top of the case doesn't really change the gaming temperatures in any meaningful way when using an air cooler. Okay, now comparing the T500's stock configuration to all the other cases I've tested. Looking at the sound level testing first, it is one of the quietest cases on this chart. The other cases around the T500 only have 1 fan, and since the T500 has 6 fans, that tells you how quiet these fans really are. Moving on to the CPU workload test, the T500 is at the bottom of the chart, performing even worse than the Cube 110, which again only has 1 stock fan. In the stock fan configuration game testing, the T500 is pretty much in the middle of the chart. for GPU temperature, but it does have one of the worst CPU temperatures on this chart. Moving along to the 35 dBA noise equalized testing. So having all the cases noise equalized to 35 dBA from 50 centimeters away, or running all the fans at full speed if the case doesn't actually get up to 35 dBA. In the CPU workload test, the T500 is again at the bottom of the chart. Moving on to the noise equalized game testing, the T500 is again pretty much in the middle of the chart for GPU temperature, but it again has one of the worst CPU temperatures on this chart. So what do I think of the PcCooler C3 T500? It is a really nice looking case with some good functionality. You can have up to 2 hard drives plus an SSD and any M.2s that are on your motherboard, so there's plenty of storage space. It fits up to a 200mm ATX power supply, and there are plenty, and I mean plenty, of radiator options for this case. Which then leads into the real issue of this case, and that's that it's not ideal for the CPU to have an air cooler. Much like the O11, this case is meant for water cooling. That is either AIO or custom, but water cooling nevertheless. Meaning if you have an air cooler you're wanting to keep, or you do just prefer air cooling over water cooling, this likely isn't the best case for you. And just to clarify, I'm saying not ideal for air cooling, not possible. There could be a more ideal fan configuration that would help out an air cooler that I can't quite think of, but certainly for the 2 fan configurations I tested, it's not ideal for air cooling. Now, on the other hand, if you're wanting to do a custom loop or have an AIO, this is a really nice looking case and gives you some pretty interesting functionality that you don't really find with other cases. There is one last thing I wanted to talk about, and that's the stock fans, and that they're not very good performance-wise. Having a 3 to 5 Celsius difference after removing the filters kind of indicates that pretty well, I think. Can they be used? Will they work? Yes, most likely. Just as long as you have fresh air blowing directly onto the GPU temperatures will do pretty well. But as far as I'm concerned, they are pretty much throwaway fans. So if you are interested in this case for a water-cooled system, you may also want to budget in for new fans. Just, again, something to keep in mind. And I guess that's all I have for this one. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're still watching and you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I drop a new video. There is the HFG Discord server. It is completely free to join, and all members get to view all of my charts. Or not all of my charts, but the charts for my CPU coolers, my PC case fans, and cases. A link is in the description. There is also Patreon if you'd like to support the channel directly. Again, a link is in the description. You may want to check out this video here. I'll probably throw up my PC case playlist. If you didn't like this case, you might be able to find a case in there that you really like. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.